is impacting a large number of players. And for our weekly review of how trading went this week, we're actually focused on this issue and its impact on Tesla stock. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. We're joined by the Semi, as you can see. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So we're focused today on, usually our Saturday show focuses on what happened this past week, what are we looking forward in the coming week, and why. So we also want to remind you, we really appreciate our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, again, please take time to like and subscribe. So I was kind of surprised at what happened with Tesla this week. There's an open question as to why it is that most of the analysts that generally support Tesla did not show up after some great sales numbers. So there's a conversation we often share regarding the fact that there's an Indian proverb that says that there were 5 blind men, each of whom were holding a different part of an elephant, and each of them knew that their part of the elephant was exactly what the elephant looked like. And so to some extent, that's the beginning of our show today in terms of looking at how this works. So Tesla comes out with great numbers. Usually what's happened over the last 3 years is when Tesla comes with better than expected numbers, the analysts will do an upgrade. The upgrade results in more people buying the shares, particularly large institutions that they work with buying those shares and setting the share price higher. So we have not seen that happen yet. And the open question is, why is that the case? And how can we sort of figure out, why can we figure out what's going on? And one of the potential answers, because I don't think anybody absolutely knows the answer unless they paid a huge amount of money to find out, is what's going on with the chip shortage in auto. So what I did was, I have a few classmates from Stanford who, one of whom was a longtime employee at Texas Instruments. He left the industry, kind of returned. And so I went through a few of our industry experts to figure out kind of what's going on here and what's going on with the chip shortages, et cetera, and how long is it before they think that this thing will finally sort of work out so everybody can go back to work. So I'd have to say that I had, so I'll just do it from this direction. The first sort of person I interviewed is actually a friend of mine who has a PhD from Georgia Tech and in a computer science area. And what he highlighted is that one of the challenges that's out right now is that TSMC is having a drought in Taiwan. So he pointed out that they're having to shut down farmers to get the water needed to feed their fabrication facilities there. And that may create somewhat of a shortage based on the fact that they're running out of water and the government has chosen to shut the farmers down but not the fab factory. So he thought that that was one variable that might come into play that would start to impact the amount of chips that are available for sale. I then had to sign off with him and switched over to another friend of mine who's a Stanford MBA, and he's working tangentially to the chip industry, so he's had a chance to look at what's going on. And he threw out several data points I thought were interesting. First, he pointed out that what's happening right now is that a lot of the auto companies were shut down during COVID and they're starting to restart. And what he pointed out to me is that he actually thought that there were some companies that were doing well, some that weren't doing well. And they were looking for the shutdown of the chip facilities as a way to sort of hide the fact that their operations are not going well. So basically, there are certain companies that are doing well, no problem, but there are others that are not. And the ones that are not doing well are maybe using, he thinks, the chip shortage as a way to suggest that things are generally bad for the entire auto industry, but there are those that are actually cranking and doing well and those that are not. So I thought that was an interesting look. The second point he made was that there's a problem right now with what's called triple ordering. So the problem that popped up is that if you're doing triple ordering, so there are companies that are short on chips that will triple their orders, and this obviously can create a backlog for competing firms that don't get it. So that don't get the chips they need. So the the industry is somewhat cyclical. There are these boom and bust periods that happen sort of every 10 years. One of the executives at his company that's been in the industry for 35 years indicated this is the worst he's ever seen it in terms of available supply of chips relative to the needs of the companies, particularly in the auto industry. So I'd have to say I'm not stunned by this, but because I just read an article that indicated that we've gone from about 20% use of chips in vehicles to about a 50% use, particularly as we move into vehicles like EVs. And this giant increase in the number of chipsets that are being used can definitely impact what's going on, but you simply order and then use. So this is another data point I thought was interesting. You're having increased usage, particularly as we go more into the hybrid and EV space. The next item that was pointed out was that we were asking about lead times. So there are a number of companies that are shut down and have given fairly short lead times prior to them being able to get back to full production. So what he indicated was that 20 weeks is a realistic time period for companies to restart operations and start building again. So I was kind of surprised by this. It was my understanding that one of the challenges you have is when you're dealing with sophisticated chips, you end up with a lot longer lead time because all those are mostly spoken for. What was suggested was that when you're in auto, they tend to use 3-year-old chips, so their chips may not necessarily be the most sophisticated, which makes it easier for them to get inventory back sort of to normal faster because they're not necessarily at the bleeding edge. A quick note on the bleeding edge there is that TSMC, along with Samsung, have the ability to go to the smallest sort of size chips, in the current iteration. What's great about that is that when you look at the new M1 and other sort of latest technology, is the smaller you go, it requires less power, so therefore they're in your cell phones or in laptop devices, you're getting better battery life because your chipset is not necessarily using as much power. And so this is why there's a race to that smallest chip size, and therefore all the benefits that spin off of it are actually, there's a number of them, but in particular, the less power used, the more efficient it is in terms of being in mobile devices that are power hungry. So why I decided to move through all these layers of what's going on with the chips is the market seems to be saying, Tesla, you've claimed you're doing well. Elon sent a tweet, and frankly, that's another sort of clue, is that Elon indicated tangentially that he wanted to thank all of his suppliers for maintaining, the agreed upon shipments. And so I think that it's clear that Elon was aware that, hey, this might be a problem for us right now relative to people feeling that we don't have the chip supplies necessary to maintain and grow the business, given the shortages experienced by other firms. So we're sort of getting all these clues as to the fact that the whole chip situation is a big deal, including Elon's comments. And so what I wanted to sort of grab onto is the fact that it's my belief that the reason Tesla's stock price is not up is that there are kind of two components anytime you get data to work from on a major basis. The first component is, how are your operations doing currently? And so the number of vehicles delivered say that half of the equation is solid for Tesla. The next question that comes up though is, well, great that you were able to deliver that number, and that's a backward looking number. The question is, how are you looking on a forward basis? So can you get the chips needed to continue to grow and scale the business as you have been into the future successfully? And so that's the answer that everyone seems to be waiting for as we go into earnings coming up. I believe, based on what Elon tends to do, he's going to be somewhat vague, but I think he's going to assure people that they're not having any issues with the chips that they're supposed to be getting, and therefore they should be fine. So I think that this is the answer that is lurking there on what's the chip situation. Now, the question that comes up is, when will the analysts confirm there's no chip shortage issues for Tesla? And once that's confirmed, I think the stock will pop nicely. And the answer to that is that I kind of feel like we end up swimming up and down 30 to 40 points, particularly over the next week, because I don't think anybody is going to be able to, definitively answer that question until we figure out at earnings, when Elon's asked the question, what he actually says, because the manufacturers don't seem to be giving up the info, and therefore we're kind of stuck in this, it's an unknown zone. So I wanted to review all this with you because we're heading into another week. It looks like Tesla ends up at or around $700 a share, at the beginning of the week, and then we roll in towards the end of the week. The second sort of thing that's going on right now is, yes, it looks like inflation is taming itself a bit as we're seeing COVID erupt in Europe and in some places in the United States. So the potential of lockdowns are affecting the ability of consumption of fuel, travel, all these other things restarting, impacting what do we look like in terms of volume of activity in the business world, and therefore potential inflationary impacts. So I would argue then that we're in this zone right now where we're in a very much unknown zone, but from what I could see in terms of operating fundamentals for Tesla, everything is very, very solid with no major changes. I would say that if there's any issue that Tesla may be having, and we'll find out about this over the next 3 weeks, and that is that it's one thing to maintain a steady state of your current production levels. It's another thing to show the growth rate necessary to keep driving the business. And what's happening in China and the new factories that are coming online soon for Tesla suggest the longer term is solid on the growth. The question is what's going to happen in the medium term, particularly with this chip shortage, and would it hit the factory in China, for example, in Shanghai, and affect the ability of it to grow. I really would say that the one surprise I've had from Tesla over the last, let's say week and a half, is that if you kind of tease out the numbers, the suggestion was that 5,000 vehicles were produced in China in December that Tesla was not allowed to sell until mid-January. And so one of the question marks I have in mind is, how is the ramping of the Model Y facilities going in China? There was a number that came out that said Tesla sold 5,000 plus cars that were Model Ys in February. And in January, there was also a suggestion that all of the Model Ys available for the first quarter were already sold out and orders were being taken for the second quarter. So I think that a huge question that's going on right now is, when does the Model Y production in China get up to a 10,000 a week, at least 5,000 a week? That way they can have, let's say, 20,000 vehicles a month coming out that are just Model Ys, even if it results in fewer Model 3s sold. So as you can see, if you get that type of ramp up to the Model Y sort of production levels in that 5,000 to 10,000 of vehicles zone, this lines Tesla up for easily a million vehicle a year. And I felt, from what I saw, that the numbers were excellent, nothing to argue about, but I was really expecting to see a powerful impact of Model a powerful impact of Model 3 coming on, and then the impact suggesting that, hey, if China can build them, we could get 1 million cars out of China this year. I really am not getting that feeling, even though there's the demand there for the Model Y, particularly the low-cost Model Y that's in China, not only in China, in Japan and some of these other places, but also in Europe. I was actually very surprised to learn. I spoke with a Tesla viewer and owner who indicated that driving Model S in Europe is very difficult, particularly he was in England, and he was saying that the roads really aren't set up for a car that big, and that the smaller Model Y is actually a better fit for a number of reasons. So I think there's some unknowns out there, and the degree to which Elon answers the questions about those unknowns will definitely help the stock. And I think right now we're kind of back in our wait for the analysts to confirm that, yeah, Tesla's not having any shortage problems like the other manufacturers, but it definitely feels as though the market / those analysts are saying, we're not upgrading you until you definitively tell us that you're not having a chip shortage like other firms. And the other sort of back end of this is to say, hey, we know you're very low on people as a way to save cost, and why is it that your supply chain might be so much better than competitors who have way more people and way more experience managing their supply chains? So I just think that there's this unknown zone on that side, and it's resulting in a slowdown of Tesla and its stock. And I don't know if a 2 or 3 word confirmation from Elon without being specific is sufficient to assuage the concerns of the market / the analysts. And so therefore, I just think that we're kind of in this, the stock should be up. We don't believe that you guys are okay on your chip supplies, and therefore we're not going to give you any more affection. And so that's where we are now, is my belief. But we're definitely also open to your suggestion of what might be occurring. So this ends our formal discussion of Tesla portion, and we sort of jump over now to our discussion of health tips. So again, for today, we're going to review the fact that the 5-2 or the other diets relative to fasting are one area we want to encourage you to check out. We also wanted to encourage you to think about, there's something called core training. So all it is that there are different exercises you can do to train your core, which I think you'll find impressive in terms of impact on back issues. I also wanted to encourage you to consider, if you're 6 feet and above, running on soft surfaces might be another good way to prevent back pain and injury. Also wanted to suggest that if you're going to go to bed, do so 4 hours of eating, ideally minimum 2 hours, let the food digest prior to sleep. And then we also wanted to encourage you to think about maintaining the same sleep schedule for a couple of weeks to allow your body to get into a natural circadian rhythm, which will set you up for long-term sort of better sleeping etiquette and health. And the final one that I just learned from one of our viewers is called it's called forest bathing. So this is an interesting concept I learned from one of our viewers regarding spending more time in nature, because being exposed to nature in a lot of different, 5 or 10 minute intervals for time will allow your body to recover, better sleep, less tension, etc. So this might be a suggestion of something to consider as well. So, at any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss German, au revoir French, Licht Road, Hebrew, Choda Hafez Farsi Strasvice, Russian, Ni hao ma Chinese, Konbanwa Japanese, Heido Swedish, good day, our friends from Australia, Namaste, our friends from India. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good man. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day. Bye for now. We look forward to your constructive criticism. We do have some SpaceX shares. If there's interest, please hit us with a note on Teslafaninsight. On Facebook, a private message would be appreciated. I will note that we're having a problem with our email and trying to work it out with Wix at Teslafaninsight.com. But we'll get this figured out. Therefore, we're using our facilities. We also, if you're on Patreon, that's another way. You could also look us up for shares if there's interest. Thanks and have a great day. Bye for now. We look forward to our next conversation. Best of luck in the coming week of trading. I think it looks a lot like this past week in terms of no key direction until, some key issues are answered for the analysts, and then they'll give up upgrades afterwards. Once again, best of luck. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye for now.